It's time for the UNX News. Extraterrestrials, time anomalies, dimensions, remote viewing, UFOs, UAPs, and USOs, ghostly encounters, abductions, Bigfoot, and more. Your end of the week news source for everything unexplained. Here is your host for the UNX News Podcast, Margie K.
Good evening, everyone. Well, we're having some technical difficulties tonight. Hopefully our guest is going to be able to actually get in because his link is not working for some reason. But I believe we'll get that straightened out. I do want to remind you to subscribe to the UNX Network YouTube channel to get notices about new videos, and then also subscribe to the UNX Network at unxnetwork.com, where you can get a free or a paid membership and get a lot of perks, including our daily newsletter that outlines all of our shows that are going to be coming up every evening. All right, my guest tonight is Rich Hoffman. Rich is an Army Information Technology IT defense contractor with Chugach Government Solutions. He's a Senior Systems Engineer Analyst working in the U.S. Army Materiel Command Headquarters at Redstone Arsenal, Huntsville, Alabama. He serves on the Executive Board Officer for the Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies, which he founded. He is also a board advisor for the Society for UAP Studies and an advisor for UAP expeditions. In 2022, Rich represented the USA in a NATO Space Domain Conference, presenting the UAP threat along with Ryan Graves. In 2024, Rich met in D.C. along with other thought leaders to discuss the road to disclosure. Welcome to the program, Rich Hoffman.
Hi, Margie. It's good to be back on with you again.
Yes, so glad to see you again. It's been quite a while, and we have some things to catch up on. I know
sure enough.
There's been a lot going on with UAPs and drones, just craziness. I've noticed an uptick in UAP sightings as a member of MUFON and a field investigator for MUFON. I see this trend, and it's everywhere. It's not just in one specific place. And then we also have the drones, which have not left since September. They're still around, and I'm still getting a lot of reports. So I'd really like to get your take on all of that. What in the world is going on?
Well, I guess we can tackle the drones first. Let me characterize it this way: that I'm a ufologist, not a dronologist. But anyway, I'm one of these people that, as you very well know, Margie, that the vast majority of cases we get are often explained as natural phenomena or misidentifications of some sort, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, my UFO research and stuff like that, we get called up about, everything from planets to meteors to anything that's up in the sky is often a UFO, right? So, I mean, let me put it to you that way, that there's a lot of misidentifications even now, even with the drone thing going on. But let's talk about it for a second. I'm a drone pilot. I'm aware. I've had a drone that I fly at least for like the last 5-6 years or so. And originally, you had to register your drone with the FAA and let them know, and then they would give you a little tag that you could put on your drone, and then that would identify you as being a legal pilot, if you would. You can fly. And then they have the various documents that they came up with to give us guidance, because suddenly that they knew that drones were going to be up on the uptick, right? So a lot of people began buying drones. In fact, there's a report that says over 1 million drones in the United States alone, right?
Oh my gosh.
So now you got 1 million drones, right? And then that's what you know about. But then there's also people building drones There's
Mm.
also, there are very specialized drones. Like, for example, you've got drones for cinematography purposes that are 8 feet in diameter. Big. You've got
Wow.
drones. You have drones for other applications like agriculture. You've got drones for being able to use LiDAR to be able to go above cloud layers. You've got drones that are just, police have drones. I mean, there's a whole host of drones that are out there. And of course, I work with the military, and of course, they have plenty of drones. So there's drones literally everywhere. And the United States population needs to get used to it because they're not used to it. And let me amplify the fact that it's only within the last year or so that you had the FAA now letting us fly them at night.
Oh, really?
So now
Hmm.
what you have, but yeah, originally you had to have the drone within 30 minutes after sundown. It had to be out of the sky, unless you
Right.
had authorization to have your drone up. Like, you might have some sort of an authorization. I would have to coordinate with the local control tower, the FAA people, and say, hey, I'm going to fly my drone. I'm letting you know in advance and everything else, and that
Mhm.
type of thing, right? So that's what the way it all came about, is that suddenly now you have people that are allowed to fly their drones at night that are now being seen in the skies by the general public and are very alarming to them because they're not used to seeing that, right? And
Exactly.
and so let me take this one step further. In 1965 and in 1973, those are two flap years that we had with with UAP, right? So, and you know about flaps. I mean, it's a high concentration of sightings in a given area within a period of short time, right?
Mhm.
So, and the way many times when I investigated in the UAP drone or flap periods, you had a situation where you might have had a legitimate sighting up front. It then gets covered on the evening news, and then everybody is hearing about this, and now they're outside seeing objects that are moving around the sky, and now wanting to call them UAP. So let's say
Mm.
you have aircraft in the area that they're not familiar with and they don't spend their time looking at, or you might even have the planet Venus, believe it or not. I had 30 people out looking at the planet Venus, and I had to go out and tell them, I'm sorry, you're looking at the planet Venus.
Yeah, I've
So,
had the same
so,
thing.
so the problem gets the fact that the news media brought it on, and then what happens? All these different people around the city are all reporting, oh, I see one too. I see one too. So now you have a sudden burst of reports. And then that becomes, now let's talk with the mayor, because now I'm quite concerned about the UAPs that are up in the sky, or UFOs at the time, up in the sky. And so suddenly we have a plethora of these things, right? It's going on. And then, so what you have is that now they're all speculating because they don't know about UFOs or, anything like that. So they're
Mhm.
speculating and say, well, it's somebody at the base, or it's somebody there. This is what it is. And we see the same thing with this whole activity that was going on up in the Northeast quadrant, right? So suddenly you have, drones that are legally allowed to fly in the air that are being reported, followed by the fact that you now have the police sending up their drones. You also have other pilots of drones wanting to send their drones to go look for the other drones. And so now you've got a ton of drones up in the air seen by the general citizens. And let me clarify one other thing. If I put my drone up right now in my neighborhood, my one drone, and I fly it around, and 30 people all decide to report their sightings of drone. So now, does that mean to the general public that we have 30 drones or one?
Right. Right.
And so my point there is that all around the perimeter of people seeing these drones, they're all reporting it. So now you have suddenly this large volume of reports that are coming in based on maybe seeing one or two drones.
Mhm.
The problem you have with the whole drone thing up in the Northeast quadrant is that you had drones that were being, well, then let me ask one step further. suddenly planes and helicopters all suddenly became drones. And we had a large number of incidents where people were doing stupid stuff, illegal stuff, like taking their laser pointers and now pointing it and blinding the pilots. That's against the law.
It is.
And so now you've got that idiocy going on top of it. Now, in the meantime, you've got the news media wanting out to talk politicians who don't know anything about UAV drones or the FAA rules or anything that's going on. And they're all speculating about, well, that's probably Iranians, or it's this, or it's that. So the next thing you know is you got speculation going on, and everybody's getting wound up from a hysterical standpoint with all of the wonderful drone activity that's going on. Let's add one thing onto that. And that is that because you've got drones now looking for drones and all these other aircraft, you also have a situation where, again, all these misidentifications of things that are going on, you might have had some actual, enemy of ours, let's put it that way, that is now using that kind of hysteria to fly drones and do what they want to do with dirty work and take advantage of that.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't know. And then you have politicians speculating about what it is, not knowing. And then another thing I'll point out to you, Margie, and you'll know what I'm talking about. People, when you look at something in the sky, you have no way of knowing the distance or the size.
Right.
And so you had reports on the media saying, oh, it was as big as a car. Okay, well, how did you know that? How far away was it? Did you know the angular size to that thing? Do you know the distance? How did you know or come up with that? And it's a lot of it's speculation because people are generally inaccurate about determining the size or anything like that, or even the distance in the nighttime sky.
For the most part, yes.
I can tell you right now, I'm on the approach to Huntsville Airport right over here. And I can look out my window and I can look and see an object that's moving across the sky that looks like it could be a drone if it were up close. It's an aircraft going in. It's a Boeing 777. So it's like, no, I mean, at a distance it looks quite a bit different. But again, errors on the part of decisions and stuff. So you had that reported. Oh, these things are huge. And a lot of people don't know about the sizes that these things can come in or the speeds that they can fly. They've now got drones that are being built that are, believe it or not, we had the battery operated ones, followed by, after the small ones, they're out there. Now we got fuel cells for them. They can actually operate and stay up in the air for a long, long time. And then guess what? There's even a hybrid where it uses like your hybrid vehicles. It can use the battery and it can also use fuel, so it can stay up even longer. Right. And we're even getting into now drones that are potentially using hydrogen fuel cells. So, I mean, you're starting to get more and more in terms of the development of these things all across the world, everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, where you're at, people can fly their drones at night. In every part of the United States, you can fly them at night. So guess what? Every state is going to be reporting that they are seeing drones. And the other thing that I've noticed is that there's a lot of these things where drones, you'll see them especially around fireworks displays. You quite often.
Oh, every time.
You go to a firework display, boom, there's a drone up there that's moving around, several of them maybe, or there might be some sort of events going on or something of that nature. So we as ufologists are getting this whole plethora of these reports that are really drones, but, to the general public, they're not as informed about it, and they think that it might be a UFO, and it's not. And the other part of it is you do have our enemy that are also flying drones and are actually looking at military bases and going on our perimeters of our military bases, which has now become a concern for the military from the concern of our perimeters and our safety on the bases and stuff like that. So like if you go over to my base here, you'll see drone activity is not allowed, signs everywhere, you can't fly your drone and stuff. But let me also point out to you that if I went over right now and I flew my drone over there before anybody would probably see it, know it, and report it, I could have done the dirty work that I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the other part of that is that you also have drones that are now not corresponding to the rules of building drones at a certain frequency. They're supposed to fly with a certain frequency. And guess what? They're at a different frequency. And so even our methods of knocking them out of the sky, using a drone buster, which we're putting out for the DoD, it can't knock them out of the sky if it's at a different frequency. So now we're making adjustments to that even to be able to knock them out with other kinds of means.
So what was the final consensus on all these swarms of drones that were lining up near air bases, just on the outside perimeter of it?
So
was there a final decision?
No, and here's the problem with that is that if I tell you that there were drones over the base, that's one thing. If I told you that they were near the base,
mm-hmm.
how far away were they? And there's a certain distance you're supposed to be away where you can fly a drone. So I saw one case where it was right on the edge of where the allowable space was. And it turned out it was over a wildlife area. And this is where people could legitimately go fly their drones over a marshy area where they wouldn't be over the public, but it happened to be near Langley.
Mm-hmm.
So now is it over the base? Is it around the base? Or is it beyond the base? And words matter. And so a lot of people are conflating it from the standpoint that they're using words that it was over the base when it wasn't. And so that, like the ones in Langley, not the ones in December, but ones a few months later, were actually out where they're supposed to be flying their drones at night. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm trying to say is that we're sensitive to that. And now there's a push to be able to give and not all of the bases had these drone buster kinds of things that we're implementing. So now we're making sure that they all do as a routine, and that we are able to now, protect our critical infrastructure. And it's not just, at our place. It's what about the nuclear facilities we have? What about some of the other very sensitive areas around the country
mm-hmm.
that we also need to make sure we've got drone busters to protect ourselves in case the enemy does want to come in and do damage to us? And as well as I do, we're equipping drones now with missiles and everything else, and even using them over in theater. And even the drones themselves are weapons, So
mm-hmm.
you've got a problem in that regard, and we have to be really very cautious about that.
I had 3 cases that were rural areas outside the greater Kansas City area, so several miles out. Nothing is going on out there. There was no sensitive bases, nothing. And in all 3 cases, they were large drones. But in one, this guy got video of a drone on his property in front of a tree line and in front of a particular large tree.
Mm-hmm.
So we could gauge the size of the drone
mm-hmm.
and the height off of the ground and the distance from the person. Yeah. And so this thing was very large. It was probably 16 feet wide, maybe half again as tall. And it had a very low hum sound to it. But it was definitely a sound was coming from it. And it had 4 lights on the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking drone. I'm not thinking UFO.
Yeah.
And it hung out there for several minutes and then just slowly moved away. And he was standing there filming the whole thing. Supposedly, I would imagine that whoever was operating the drone, there was a camera on it. He was able to see this guy, and he didn't seem fazed by it. What in the world does anybody have? What business do they have with this huge drone that's very expensive, by the way? Yeah, I looked up the prices on these things is just astronomical.
Well,
I mean, what would be a reason for someone to be on a rural property like that in the middle of nowhere?
So let me clarify that for you, because if you take a look, for example, if I want to fly my drone, I have an airport here, I've got a military base here, right around where I live, right? I've got the approach for all of the aircraft coming into Huntsville. If you look at, and we all have an app that when we fly our drones, we have to check, it's called Before You Fly or something like that. You click on it and you make sure you're out of range of a circle, and it tells you how high you're allowed to fly your drone. So in my case, my house is about 5 miles away from the airport. And within that 5-mile radius, I can't fly my drone here without letting the airport know that I'm flying it at all. So where do I go? Most people will go out, like I was telling you before. They go to a wildlife range, or they go to rural areas away from where there's any kind of like military base or place. Because there, if I look at my app, it says I'm allowed to fly it. And I can go up to 400 feet, and I could be in complete compliance with the FAA rules for my flying drones. So a lot of people are going into the rural areas because they can't fly them in the cities. Nobody around here in the city of Huntsville is allowed to fly it anywhere around the city of Huntsville.
What are they allowed to fly over anyone's property?
Yes.
Okay. So these people that think that their property is theirs and is their private land, anybody can fly over at any time.
That is correct.
Wow.
And so ultimately you have a situation where, because of these the way that the rules are, and I encourage people to go up and look at the FAA rules on drones and small drones and small pilot drones, but they'll see the same thing. If you go up to the FAA site on that, you'll find out, no, you're able to fly these things pretty much everywhere. Now there's a lot, and here's another thing. Let me take one other step. They're starting to build drones that now have, for example, they're already built with some sort of they call it remote ID. So if you think about like the ADS-B we have on aircraft, where it tells us that is going along, we can look at an app and we can see where it's at, right? The Flight Aware or Flight Radar tells us about that aircraft that's up there. Mm-hmm. All right. This is not ADS-B.
Right.
But this is a remote ID, and the remote ID has on it, and it's now built into the commercially sold drones, where you can put that on it. And now if an app I can go to, and I would be able to say that Rich Hoffman is flying a drone over at this area, and it can be seen by the app. Right?
Okay. So
now
law enforcement has this app then?
Yeah. So
okay.
They should anyway. I don't know how much that they're aware of that, but anyway, now they have the remote ID. So now I have an older drone. If I don't install that remote ID capability on my drone and I'm flying it, I'm not going to be detected by that app.
Right.
Okay. So what I'm trying to tell you is that not everybody is in compliance with the FAA rules, especially if they're, and then the other part of the problem is that you're allowed to fly a drone 13 years and above. Do you believe a 13-year-old is necessarily going to know FAA and keep up with FAA rules?
No.
They got a drone for Christmas and they want to now go fly it, and so they're going to fly it anywhere, right?
Oh yeah.
So now you got lawbreakers going on everywhere, and you have, let's just go down there to the military base and fly around and check it out. So you actually have some of those kids probably wanting to do that too, right?
Oh yeah.
So it's a total mess, and we struggle to be able to. And then a lot of the drone pilots do not want to put that remote ID on it, because guess why? If I'm flying over your house, and you find out who I am, and you know where I live.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I could have people. So now you have this pushback by drone pilots to even begin to put the remote ID device on their drones.
Exactly. Okay.
All
right. Well, we're up on a break. 3 minutes. We'll be right back after this.
It's time for the Onyx News. Extraterrestrial. The UNX Network presents a health and wellness spiritually based brand of hemp-derived CBD products made by Hopewell Farm in Harrogate, Tennessee. We apply our Cathara energy work with all of our plants and products. Our products made in small batches with only 2 ingredients of pure hemp, full spectrum crude oil, and coconut-derived MCT oil. Third-party lab tested for potency and legal THC levels with 6 strengths of 1 ounce oil to choose from. Know what you're buying and get what you pay for from Hopewell Farm. Applied directly to a specific area, Hopewell Farm topical salve in 1 ounce and ½ ounce sizes made with pure hemp crude oil, comfrey extract, and all natural ingredients. Find the Hopewell Farm link and coupon code on the UNX Network website at unxnetwork.com. That's unxnetwork.com.
Tickets are now on sale for Rebels of Disclosure 2025, May 12th through the 15th in Grafton, Illinois at the beautiful Pierre Marquette Lodge and Conference Center. This will be a 4-day event with 12 speakers covering topics such as ET contact, experiencer testimonies, lost history, secret space programs, time travel, Illuminati, parallel realities, and so much more. Visit journeytotruth.online for more details.
The new book, How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom, is now available from UNX Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine who may be doing the haunting and why. How to Research a Haunted House can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unxmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unxmedia.com or amazon.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to UNX News. I'm your host, Margie Kay, and we are talking with Rich Hoffman this evening about drones and UFOs and the latest. And you are a wealth of information about drones, Rich. I would say you are a specialist in the field with all of this knowledge that you've got.
Well, Margie, you know as well as I do. I mean, to me, it's like when you investigate UFO sightings and stuff like that, you have to really know what's out there that people misidentified or could be misidentified. So most of my life, I've studied the IFOs, if you would, to know what up there, like what are the advancements in aircraft you got going on right now? I mean, what do they look like? When the drones came on, I said, well, I need to know about the drones, to be able to know how to, because people are misidentifying them. And then I started looking into Chinese lanterns, and people were those. Well, what that's, you have to, so you really have to do your homework as an investigator to look at what all is up there that people get confused often about, and to know and separate that when you're going in and looking at the various hypotheses for explaining it and saying, well, what natural hypotheses that are out there? And so, I mean, my job is to get to know about drones, because guess what? People are reporting them as UFOs. And so
they are.
I spent a lot of time on that. So
we've got a question from Carl. What about the drones that were observed spraying?
Well, I mean, I don't know. There are drones that can spray. I mean, they're using them for crop dusting and various other things right now. But spraying, and then the other problem with that is that I don't know whether these things have some sort of maybe a jet exhaust or something like that they're using. Some of the types of remote drones that look like aircraft, more like than the quadcopters, may have a trail that follow them with some smoke or something of that nature. But I'm not aware of, myself, I've not looked into cases of drones that are emitting some sort of spraying, other than the fact that I am aware that they do use them to spray things, over crops or over certain areas and stuff like that. So that's about all I can say about it, really. I don't know.
And we've got a question from Donna. Are drones allowed to fly over residents, and are they liable for damage to property for mishaps?
Well, that's a good question. So yes, they're allowed to fly over residences. I mean, again, you don't own the airspace above you. Do you complain about the aircraft that flew over your, over your head? And the answer is probably not. So again, the airspace is allowed to be flown by drones. There's no restrictions on them. And then as far as property damage is concerned, I think that's part of why they wanted to put the remote ID on them, because now they would be able to track if there's any instance like that happened from a drone. And yeah, the pilot should be held liable for any damage caused by their drone, to your property. I will also point out that we've had a situation like even in Florida over the Christmas time, just prior to Christmas, there was a drone show. And during that drone show, suddenly a whole bunch of the drones were falling out of their pattern and came crashing down. And one boy was actually hit by the propeller from one of the drones. Ooh. And ended up, he had to have heart surgery because it actually hit him in the chest. Oh. And the propeller from that thing caused damage to him. So, and that was I think a 7-year-old boy that was injured from it. So you can pretty well imagine that, there's a liability aspect to that as well. And there's other instances where these, drone shows where they lose their GPS signal or something of that nature that can come crashing out of the sky. And so you have to be very, very cautious with those things.
Yeah, I did see a drone show one time in Kansas City about a year ago at night, and it was just amazing. But I was thinking, I'm glad that they're away from the crowd of people. They were not flying directly over the crowd, and I would say that's probably a really good idea.
Very definitely. I mean, these things can come. I mean, the payloads alone on these things can be very, very heavy, and the size of these things can also be very, very heavy. And to have one of those things come crashing down on you because it lost its GPS signal or something. And then here's the other aspect that you might not be aware of: the drone busters that we have for the Army and the military that they're implementing. Basically knock them dead, and then they fall out of the sky. And so we have to even be very cautious about using those, because again, it's a situation where if one comes in the perimeter of the base, we might be able to do it. But then where's the perimeter of the base and all this other stuff? You don't go outside of the perimeter because that could be a neighborhood, And so how and when do you use the drone buster? And there was one instance, for example, up in New Jersey, where you had apparently a drone buster was used on a drone that was being chased by another drone who was looking for drones.
Oh my gosh.
So, I mean,
it just gets more and more complicated.
It does. And then add in the fact that you also have UAP out there. And UAP are not as there's not as many of those things. They're very rare phenomena, but bottom line is that's added into the mix, and it gets just very, very confusing. So
it's very confusing. I had an incident that I still to this day, it just happened in November. I cannot identify it. And I'm a 40-year trained investigator, UFO investigator. I don't know if it was a UFO or a drone.
Yeah. And this is, by the way, this goes back to the fact that we who study the UFO we keep getting asked about, but we have to learn about the IFOs that are out there, and just as much as we need to know about the UFO, right? And so we've got to do our homework and really become very knowledgeable about drones, because guess what? They're being misreported left and right. And you have you get cases, and you have to go and solve the case, and you have to include all these other IFO kinds of things into your study, right? So yeah, it's very problematic.
Do you think that the drones are the reason for the uptick in UAP sighting reports?
I haven't seen anybody make a correlation on that. And then the other problem is, I think that, there's many factors around people reporting UFOs, or if you would. number one, they become more knowledgeable about what's going on in terms of up on the hill. And they say, well, wait a minute. Now that the government is out there, I can report it because I feel somebody's doing something, right? I'm legitimately not going to be called a kook, you know? So we have an uptick because people feel more confident in reporting and not being called a kook. And they feel like they can do that now. And I don't necessarily, and going back to the fact that we usually explain a lot of these things, it's, are they all reporting, what, the planet Venus? Are they reporting what, and it's not until you got and investigate the cases that you look at now how many ones that are actually unknowns to see if there really is an uptick. An uptick in reporting does not mean that there's an uptick in activity of UFOs.
That's correct. Let me clarify something though, that it's separate from just the sightings.
Okay.
There has been an uptick, at least in my state of Missouri, of close encounters with UFOs and non-human entities who make themselves known and with close contact. There has been a big uptick in the last year of that sort of thing. And I need to do research to find out if it's worldwide or if it's just a small area where that is. Have you heard anything about that?
No. Again, I go back to the fact that I think a lot more people are feeling much more confident in doing the reporting where they didn't do it before. And I think that, and so they're becoming more informed about the UAP and because there's just so much stuff that's out there that's telling them about it. Right. So again, I look at it as being more like I feel comfortable in reporting. I don't, back in the time of when I was doing it, I've been at this for 60 years, as you very well know, the whole UFO investigations and stuff like that. But back in the Project Blue Book days and stuff like that, a lot of people didn't feel confident reporting to Project Blue Book.
Oh, yeah.
And so, they reported 12,000 cases over the years that they did it. But quite frankly, I don't buy that was the number of actual UFOs that were being seen by the public.
No.
So, a small number of people would have reported it to Project Blue Book in those days. So again, the problem we have is statistics, and the vast majority of sightings are not reported.
Correct.
And so we don't get a true picture of just the volume of UFOs that we've got going on. You and I experience it in the sense that when we get cases, well, it looks like that there's an uptick in cases. I got a lot more to do. But, then, even in the state that Alabama, when I was doing the state investigator and stuff like, we were down to about 30% of the cases that we couldn't explain. And then some of those were the fact that there could have been also some classified sightings of advanced aircraft that we would never know about, right? So that takes the 30% maybe down to let's just say 20%, right? And then you might have had other things that were out there like Earth-like phenomena that is poorly studied, and there's a whole host of those things that are up in the sky that people are seeing as UFOs when it was really an Earth-like phenomena. So what I come down to is that generally, if you wanted to look at it, it's probably about maybe between 5 and 10% of all cases that would tend to be in the true unknown. I can't explain it, no matter what, category.
Rich, in your 60 years investigating UFOs, what is one of the absolute best UFO cases you investigated?
Well, I also investigated the Nimitz case. We actually interviewed the 18 of the people on board of that encounter. So we talked. We also did the physics on it and found out that it was moving at about Mach 50 or above, Mach 50 to 55. Yeah, it's 55 times the speed of sound, right? So now you're talking about an object that drops from 20,000 feet and stops above the water in less than 1 second. In fact, it was 7/8 of a second. So it was
That's
moving at an incredible rate of speed, didn't have any sonic boom, didn't have no kinetic energy release, didn't have a whole host of things, no heating up in the atmosphere apparently. It's got no sign of propulsion. And as you very well know, it was seen by Commander Fravor and his Wizzo, and as well as Slate and also Dietrich in their aircraft with their eyes, as well as being picked up on the Spy 1 radar that we have aboard the ships. So, I mean, that's an incredible case, and I investigated that. So, I can say that over the years, I've investigated cases like, 70 foot in diameter crops, basically a crop circle, if you would, that was not a crop circle, but it was a circular area in the middle of a wheat field where all of the entire wheat down to the roots were all gone overnight.
Oh.
And there was microwave radiation. In addition to that was, if you go out 70 foot beyond in the 70-foot area in the middle of the wheat field, right, where there's now standing wheat all the way around it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And nobody brought in heavy equipment, did anything, because they would be obvious that they did it, right? So it's clearly from above. And then if you take a look at the fact that as you go out from the perimeter of the 70-foot area, you get on the outer edge and you start to see a little bit of roots sticking up, and then you see a little rotational pattern of some of the crop, and then you have puffed wheat around the entire 70-foot area.
Oh, something was there.
Yeah, right. So in fact, I'll be honest with you, that was my aha moment, that there was really something to this whole phenomena. But I experienced that in Carrollton, Ohio in the 70s. I investigated all the ones, probably 1,000 cases. So I'm telling you that I can go on and on. I've the stories that I've had, a case over in Mississippi, for example, because I was also the state director for over there, was a case where you had a sheriff who's retired. He's a retired sheriff. He comes out. He was out on his property. He sees a round object followed by a triangular shaped object followed by a helicopter. And he's watching this orb, triangle, and helicopter going across the sky. And he hears somebody over in this wooded area next to him, which is on public land off of his property. He goes over there and he basically is now seeing somebody that's in there wearing like dark military garb outfits, and one person holding something like, a portable laptop that he can work with, on his chest. And he tells him and threatens him to get out and to not say anything about what they're doing. So we actually get this case, we're looking into it, and the next thing you know is he had a conversation with my investigator, right, back and forth, and they were talking about it. And a couple days later, the whoever that was in the field came knocking on his door, holding up the emails between him and my investigator, and saying, "We told you not to talk about it."
Yep. They have the technology.
So bottom line was that there was something going on over that case when you have that kind of thing going on that could have been military related in a generally in public area, but he was shut down and threatened, and so again, you've had I've had a lot of cases over my 60 years of just incredible stories like that, and incredible cases where you've actually got legitimately some corroborating evidence or something of that nature, that's something really going on, right?
Yeah. You mentioned the earthquake lights earlier.
Yeah,
and of course those are often seen around fault lines, and especially before earthquakes.
Now, I'm not talking about the same thing you are.
Okay, so, what are you talking about?
So you're talking about what they call the piezoelectric, kind of like the around fault lines, where you might get a fraction or a fault line that shifts or something like that and creates this like effect, almost like ball lightning. The earth light phenomenon is a little bit different in the sense of, think of a bubble of gas, multiple gases in the bubble. that rises up out of the ground or something of that nature, can move across the atmosphere, the sky, even can get up to 2,000 feet in altitudes, and it can go across 2,000 feet in altitude and fly. And it's described by many as being an orb or big ball of like light or something like that. And it, it glows. And if you get close, I mean, like in the winter months, they tend to be 8 foot in diameter. In the warmer months, they're about 4 feet in diameter. And we've been able to get spectral imaging of these things to now tell you what the gases are on the inside of the bubble. It tells you it's made of hydrogen. It's got hydrogen and nitrogen, oxygen in it. Well, that's okay. But at the same time, it's got sulfur and it's got iron and it's got yttrium or scandium in it. And those elements come up when we do the spectral analysis on those lights, if you would. And we find out that scandium, interesting enough, is used in Hollywood to illuminate nighttime to make it look like daylight. So now this gas, which is a rare earth metal, can stimulate itself to the point where it can glow. And the earth light phenomena. And by the way, I will point out to you, if you look at the study by Dr. Harley Rutledge called Project Identification.
Yes.
In your state, by the way.
I have it. Yes.
In your state, that was that Earthlight phenomena that he was investigating there in 1973. Well, the same thing was going on over here about an hour away from me in Cloverdale, to where there was a witnessing. They've had over from 1973 on sightings of these big balls of that I'm talking about, the Earthlight phenomena. They call them spook lights, by the way. They don't know what else to call them, but these spook lights that are doing this. And 2 gentlemen were out there, have been filming it and studying it for a long time, and they see it, and they've been reporting it. We actually went out there 3 winters in a row to see if we could actually see something, and we saw some interesting things, but we didn't actually get to see that phenomena. But again, it's a phenomena that a lot of us are not aware of. But this, and the other thing that I'll point out to you is one of those balls of gases, if you would, that's lit, could go right between you and I. And on my side, I see the light. On your side, you do not see the light.
Yeah.
So the light is
many cases of that.
The light is unidirectional, not omnidirectional on all sides. And Harley Rutledge had it where he flew a plane over, nobody could see it, but on the ground they could see it, right? So there's that type of phenomena out there. So that's different from the piezoelectric things.
Right. Right. Now we have something in Missouri called the Joplin Spook Light.
Yeah.
And of course they're actually all along 37 degrees latitude for some reason. But the Joplin one, I experienced that myself a few years ago, but also when I was 14, the most amazing thing happened. We saw 2 orange balls of light, one about the size of a basketball, the other one the size of a softball, following it. Yeah. They paced our vehicle. And then when my father stopped the car on Spook Light Road, by the way, the big ball of light went in front of the car to the other side of the road and staying low to the ground, pretty low to the ground, right at eye level. And the little one came in the back window of our station wagon, and me and my brother and sister are in the back seat. This little ball of light comes through and goes right in front of us, lights up the interior, very, very soft glow, not bright.
Yeah. And
goes out the window and meets up with the other big one, and they dance around a little bit and they go off in the woods.
Yeah.
Now, is that a natural phenomena? Do gases appear to look like they're intelligently controlled?
Our interpretation of intelligently controlled means that it looked like it did something that was maneuvering in some sort of way that is not natural, or what you would think to be not rational, right? So let me point out to you that these spook lights, or these earth lights that I'm talking about, were hanging above a railroad track. Okay. And when a train came, it kind of like attached itself magnetically, because if you think about iron being on that one of the constituent parts, It now it attached itself to the train that was coming down the tracks and went with the train. So now, would you call that intelligently controlled, or was the magnetic kind of property and that connection, something that did that? And we don't really know. For some reason, the lights over here in Cloverdale move west to east or east to west, but not north to south or south to north. So then you say, well, wait a minute, underground water wells are going east to west underground. So is there some sort of a magnetic connection or a connection to that? But you could otherwise have said, well, wait a minute, they're intelligently controlled because they only fly in that east-west or west-east, right? Why don't they go north to south? And
well,
so,
I could see your point with that. Yeah. But what I witnessed seemed really intelligently controlled.
Yeah. Well, again, there's a phenomenon out there that we don't understand, and legitimately, if we don't properly investigate it or we don't really study it, we don't really know how to sort the difference between that and what legitimately could be a UAP, right? So my point to you is that there are so many unknowns out there because we haven't done our job scientifically to study the Earth-like phenomena appropriately, to separate that now and say, well, okay, and we started off the conversation with, you were talking about the piezoelectric kind of like ball. That's a different one. Now you have this other category called Earthlight, which is something else. And then you have this other thing, which is out there, which is probably a small UAP of some sort, right? That is intelligently controlled. And we don't know how to discern the difference between all these different categories. And so that classification and that study has to happen for us to be able to figure out, how do we sort that out? Because as you very well know, people just say it was an orb. Well, what does that mean? What does an orb mean? I mean, tell me what an orb is. Is it a ball of light? Well, okay, that ball of light has multiple things that can account for it, right? So, I mean, which one is it? I don't know. And it's not like that they've got like, hi, I'm an orb. Hi, I'm this or I'm that. And so we've got a lot of homework, is what I'm saying.
Well, yeah, and I'll say something else about the Joplin spook light, which is actually multiple lights that people see, different sizes. Some of the residents near this spook light road and in between two roads have had balls of light go through their house, in through their living room, and out through the other side, and then it appear on the outside of their house. So it seems that physical matter doesn't seem to stop them. They can go through anything.
Correct.
Which is bizarre.
Yeah, well, it is. And, there's a whole history of these things coming in through people's windows. That you also have ball lightning. I forgot to mention which is actually, another aspect of light, right?
Yeah.
The ball of light or plasma that's moving around. But, apparently there is no resistance from going through a building or something of that nature. And we just don't understand them yet well enough to be able to know, well, how can they do that, or what can or can't they do? These the spook lights basically are being reported. If you look at there's the Min lights in Australia, you got the Marfa lights, you got the Brown Mountain lights, you got the Missouri Piedmont sightings, you had the Cloverdale, you've got the Hestel in Norway, and these areas are like all over the globe where these things are. And I had one guy that was in Vietnam who was telling me that during the Vietnam crisis, he was watching these balls of light moving through, and they smelled like sulfur, by the way. That's one of the ingredients that we're talking about, right? And he said, yeah, it smelled like sulfur and stuff like that. And we would see these things all the time. So we don't really understand it. If you think back on swamp gas days in the early days, the swamp over the marsh, and Hynek was making the declaration that it was swamp gas. Well, he's not far off, because that can actually happen and create that ball of light or whatever like that. I don't think that explained what they saw, because they saw more detail than what that would have produced. But anyway, there's a lot that we don't know.
and still a lot to study. And Rich, unfortunately, we're out of time for this evening, but thank you so much for coming back on the program and sharing your expertise with us. I appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Glad to be on with you again, Margie. You take care.
All right. You too.
Thanks.
All right, everybody. We will see you here again next week.